Hey, it's Ryan, and welcome back to the One Man's Journey podcast. Today, we've got a really special guest, the lead pastor at the Gathering Church of St. Pete. It's a great church. It's where I attend, and I love Pastor E's services. His name is Pastor Eneyes Freitas, and I probably butchered it a little bit, but I might have got it right. But we call him Pastor E because it's a lot easier. He's just an awesome individual, very in tune and in touch with his faith. And he spreads the word quite a bit. And so I thought that would give us a little bit of a different perspective on some of the things that we've been talking about to this point throughout the podcast. So, Pastor E, I appreciate you being here. Like we were talking about before, just in the short time we've been at the gathering, I truly have come to look up to you and appreciate the organization of your sermons. You're easy to follow. You're easy to listen to, and a lot of the messages that you've presented were very timely for me and for my wife and for our family. So truly appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And I'll pass it over to you. And you've got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. So take it away.
I hope so. Thank you so much, Ryan. I feel blessed and humbled by your words, and it's been a blessing. Just short time that we know each other, but just to see you guys and see what you guys doing. Social media wise, that's how it goes. Sometimes we know people via social media, but you guys being there, and so it's awesome. So thank you so much. Yeah, I would say that. I don't know how this is going to impact somebody, but I feel like to share my story briefly as an individual that came to this country, man, 27 years ago, when we felt called by the Lord to come and working partnership with the church here, so we could start new churches and everything else, and then I did. My master's here and then doctorate degree later on in theology. But nonetheless, it's been quite a journey because, first of all, you leave everything behind, um, everything you know, for family, and knowing that when your kids grow up, they're not going to have the typical family, grandma, grandpa, aunts, and uncles around, but there's that how can I say that you're compelled to go because it's something greater than you. And yes, we missed families. Yes, we paid some, let's say, high price for this because, like, fortunately, we lost a couple of family members. I lost my dad and my mom in this whole process, and that's one of the challenges when you decided to serve and to follow what the Lord has in store for you, is to know that sometimes important moments in life, whether it's a birthday or birth or unfortunately somebody passing away, you're not going to be fully present, But one of the things that is interesting on that, Ryan, is that in those moments, you feel the Word of God coming alive more than ever. Like there's a passage of the rich young ruler you may or may not be familiar with, where he comes to Jesus and talks about that he did follow all the laws, this and that and the other. And Jesus says, "Oh, there's only one thing you needed to do: just go sell everything you have and give to the poor, and then come and follow me." And the story says that he went away saddened, because the story says that he was a man of many properties, right? And then the text goes on, and Peter and the other disciples say, "Well, how can we possibly be saved ourselves, or how can we possibly inherit the kingdom?" And Jesus, goes on to talk to them. And at the end of that text it says, "Whoever leaves," and I'm paraphrasing here, okay, "if whoever leaves field and father and mother and family, for my sake and the sake of the gospel, they will receive a double portion of whatever they left behind, not only this earth but in the world to come." So, and I tell you, man, it's been very, very much true that I would not have experienced if I have not said, "Okay, God, it's going to be hard on me. It's going to be hard on my wife," or in a way, but we want to follow you, you know. And so it's been quite a journey because of that. But at the same time, my kids, my family, we had more aunts and uncles and I would say father and mother than we could possibly ask. You know, just to give a little story, I remember I was doing my master's degree in Austin, Texas, and Denise was working in a church, and that church decided to adopt us for a Christmas. You know, the kids were little at that time, and they said, well, why don't you ask them to put a list of things that they like? We thought in our minds, well, maybe they're going to choose one item that we said we like it and give it to us for Christmas. And then so the day came for them to show us the gifts, and we got there and they took us to a room. Man, the room was filled with gifts, and it was like really unbelievable. Everything we put in our list, they bought for us. The kids were overwhelmed with joy, if you will. And I joke around, obviously, saying, well, if I only knew they would have given me everything in the list, right, I would put it a BMW or something.
Ferrari on the list, right?
Yeah, exactly. But seriously, it's being truth with a lot of hardships. One of the things as a father, as a husband, it's the weight feel that you needed to. I need to provide for my family. I need to be strong, right? And I learned that in a hard way, because sometimes you feel like you needed to be what you're not called to be. In other words, there's that what I call Messiah syndrome, right? And I say that I learned in a hard way because there was a point in my life and ministry that I tried to do everything to change this and to do that, and I ended up falling to depression, actually, really bad. I never thought I had depression until that point, and things kind of fell apart, for me personally. And it is something that, as guys, usually, people in general, we have a lot of difficulty to address that, because they say, well, no, we got to show that you can, especially if you're a pastor or somehow recognizes this leader or something. You feel like you have to hold back everything it's considered weakness, so that we can show only what is the good part of it, right? Because after all, you're a pastor, or you're a leader, or you're whatever you are, and truly, people are paying a huge price for that. In my case, praise God, I was able to go through some sort of counseling and just to process everything. I'll be honest with you, not many people know this, but I feel comfortable sharing, like down the road from that situation, 2 years later, I saw some spots on my face, and I went to the doctor. One thing led to another. I found out that I developed skin lupus. And the doctor asked me, hey, did you have any, like, a traumatic situation in your life that happened? Because they could not put their finger on why that happened. And I was about to say no when I remember exactly the 2 years earlier what happened to me, and your body responds, one way or another. Some cases are more radical, like friends that I lost along the way because they could not handle the pressure, and they decided not to process and open that to others, because after all, you're the pastor. After all, you name it, and you carry that burden. And one in particular, when I served a church in Arizona, he took his own life, like, not because things were bad. It was just because, life happens. And so I feel like I need to put this out there because, like I said, our lives here, there's a lot that I could say, but it's just suffice to say that on top of it being immigrant, which we're always going to be, I joke around saying, "Hey, have you noticed my Texan accent or something?" And people, "Oh, really? You're from Texas?" But I'll just say, we're never going to be. I mean, yes, we're citizens. We became citizens back in 2006 and so forth. But we're always going to be recognized as immigrants in a way, or Brazilian Americans, if you prefer. And that is in itself is already something you need to deal with. Plus, the fact, like I said, as a man, as a pastor, as a leader, that unfortunately, and this is in a way the church, capital C church, fall to put the pastor in this category of his family is just fine, they're great, they do everything right, the kids are awesome, the wife is perfect, the pastor never does, he never does any, or she for that matter, they never do anything wrong. And as opposed to be real, and to say, hey, I struggle, I struggle because it's life. I'm not better than you are. I'm just have experiences that you may not have had. But that's why I think God, moved me this way, because I can share some of my experience, and somehow this is going to bless somebody. I'm just saying this because not too long ago we did a series on More Than Conquerors, and the idea was to address some of these difficult themes like depression, oppression, especially for guys. We feel like we cannot share. And from the pulpit, I open up and I said, listen, when specifically the Sunday I talk about depression, and I open up during the message, and people were surprised. Some people said, wow, how can you possibly share something that, intimate? I said, because that's what I want this to be. Community where we can share things. And by sharing, you will be able to help somebody, as opposed to like the pretending culture, right? Pretending everything is fine. And so you come to church, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. I'm good. We're not actually, we don't have the freedom, unfortunately, in a place that we should have the freedom to share. And many times society culture, church culture, is pressing on you this idea that I know if you're in church, it's because you're doing everything right. No, it's the other way around. Because you're not doing fine. It's because you desperately need a God in your life. And when I say church, let me make sure that it's very clear out there that I'm not talking about the building. I'm not talking about denominations. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm talking about really the group of individuals that the Bible talks about as the body of Christ. And so church, to be church, truly should be a place where people can come. They feel so comfortable that they share the good, the bad, and the ugly, like a family. I usually say church family, right? And unfortunately, this is not being the case many times, because rightly so, people feel fearful sharing whatever's going on in their lives. After all, what are they going to say about me? What are they going to think about me if I share something? So my encouragement, if you will, as much as I know we're not going to change the culture, that's a fact. I understand that. I'm never going to change the so-called church culture, 11 o'clock on Sunday morning culture, if you know what I'm saying. But I can, in a small ways, I can contribute based on my experiences. That is not better or worse than anybody's, but it's my unique experience, and that can serve to help others. Matter of fact, a book that comes to mind is by Henri Nouwen, the wounded healer, where he talks about this idea of the wounds you accumulate in your life is not for nothing. They are there for a purpose. So that as you heal from those wounds, you'll be able to share. I usually say, like, whatever it is within you that is bleeding at some point, as you begin this process of healing, you're never going to forget, but you look at that, and instead of a bleeding, there will be a scar. And I tell you this, Ryan, not because I have it all together, because I don't. It took me a long time, man, to really come to this point and say, okay, I can look back and um, and see that and no longer live by fear. Because I'll be totally honest with you, for the longest time in my life, I was living by fear because of those wounds, because I decided to hold back within me, and I came not too long ago to the point of saying, you know what, I don't want to live by fear anymore, because in my mind, what happens is you start processing things based on your wound, on your hurt in the past. Like I said, for guys especially, that is very challenging. We don't want to show vulnerability, typically. You know, some are more open than others, but nonetheless, that's the idea. And so when I came to this point and say, you know what, I don't want to live by fear anymore, because then that whatever happened in the past will start influencing what you do now and what you think you're going to do in the future. Oh, if that happens before, it's going to happen again, right? And it's like almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in your life. And I said, no, enough of that. I'm tired. The Word of God tells us in First Timothy, God says that we shouldn't. He has not given us a spirit of fear. If that is fear is not from God, so man, I don't want any of that in my life. And so, but rather, the text says, spirit of power and love, etc. And so I say this because, even going very, being very, very vulnerable with you right now, going to the point to say, it took me a long time to recognize I had emotional, I had an emotional handicapedness within me, but because I resisted, I was making my life was man, it was hard. And I tell Denise, my wife, I said, and I cannot believe how how you were able to hang in there with me with not being treated. Honestly, I'm talking about even medically treated, so that I could be at the same level as everybody else when it comes to your anxiety, to your a number of things. Because again, there is a lot of preconceived ideas. I usually say there are people who, if somebody breaks an arm, right, they're not gonna leave the arm broken there hanging or anything. It's kind of freaky, right? You go to the doctor, you fix it, but whatever happens internally, our choice is usually, oh, nobody sees it, it's good. I tell you, in some way, some form, that's gonna come out, and not in a positive way. So that's why I decided to, going back to what I said about the series, to open up and to say, hey, here who I am. I'm not ashamed. This is what happened. This is how I decided to go, in a very practical way, not simply faith based. That is true too, prayer, etc. But also medically speaking, to be treated for whatever needed to be treated, and not, and most importantly, which was this step that I told you, that is to to share this with people, especially with guys. I'm always deeply concerned. Like I said, having lost a couple of friends, that is in my heart, to share as much as I possibly can, so that we can help each other out in different ways.
I think a lot of that comes from just, I mean, obviously, that over the years of these generations that have come before us, and especially, like a lot of us started out in small towns, right? A lot
Mm-hmm.
of, especially the 50, 60, 70-year-old men that are around,
Yeah,
there wasn't these, the big cities were just the big cities. And then it was all of these small towns around. And so, what do you do in a small town? You get up, you go to work, you come
yeah,
home, and that's it. Right.
yeah,
And you just bury everything else. And
yeah.
so I think a lot of the people, especially in my generation, are
Mm-hmm.
influenced by those people that have done that, right? That have gone to work. They worked on the farms when they were younger. They
Mm-hmm.
came out of it, and now they're like, my dad's a mechanic, my
Mm-hmm.
my uncle's a plumber, and all of these, they all have their trade, right? My other uncle's a woodworker, my aunt is a nurse, my other uncle took over the farm. So like, they all just kind of took their trades on,
Yeah.
and that was what they did. And so outside of that, they don't even know that they have pain or hurt, because
Yeah.
It was never acknowledged. You could never acknowledge that it was pain or hurt. You had to just move past it.
Yes.
And so looking back, you're looking and going, I don't really have anything that affected me because you just buried it for so long because there was
Right.
nobody there to say, "Oh yeah, you shouldn't," you should talk about that. There was nobody
Yeah.
there to support that. So, you
Yeah.
know, I think it's such an important piece, and again, why I respect you so much because you do bring just the realness of it to your sermons
Yeah.
of just like, we're all people too. Like
Absolutely.
you talk about pastor because that's your perspective.
Yeah.
I've had 6 or 7 people on here that one was a real estate team leader, and he
Mhm.
said the same thing. Like, he just buried everything. They were a number 1 team. He's just
Mhm.
buried everything, and it came out later on, and it blew up, and everything was gone.
Yeah.
And, one of them is a leader in a couple different industries, and anytime that you presume or take over that position of leadership or, some people would call it power, you
Mhm.
step
Mhm.
into that role of like, "Okay, I gotta be perfect now. I gotta
Yeah.
know everything."
Yeah.
And really the power for me and the strength and like you've
Mhm.
said is it comes from actually acknowledging that you don't know everything and that you don't have
Yes.
to push through everything. And that's where the
Yeah.
true strength comes in.
Yeah. And
Uh,
to your point, is that a couple of things that came to mind where you're sharing that is that one is you said about the culture, coming from small town. I come from a country that is, even though we've been here 27 years, but nonetheless, it's like the macho culture type, that is not good, if you will, to put things out there. But also the point, Ryan, that when you look at the scriptures, you see throughout the scriptures, and I say that wrongly, people have taught. I don't know if you ever been part of a church in Sunday school when you're little, but if you were, in my time at least, they had the lessons of the heroes of our faith, right? The word heroes already is a word that it gives you the idea that a person can do everything, right? They're perfect, they have strength, they don't do anything wrong, you name it. And truly, when you start looking at all the individuals, the guys in the Bible from the beginning to the end, they're all messed up people. So you take Abraham, who comes from a culture that they didn't even recognize God as God. They worshipped many gods. Okay, when God introduced Himself to him, he had to say, "This is who I am." Right? Not to mention Jacob. Jacob was a deceiver, fleeing from God, fleeing from his brother who want to kill him. David, my goodness, the guy did so much. And actually, the scripture talks about him being a man who walked according to God's own heart. But adultery, right, in his life. If you fast forward to New Testament, you have Peter. I usually joke around, and some people feel a little weird about it, but I say, no, Peter was a fisherman. He was a guy who, don't tell me that as a fisherman, every other word that he dropped a F bomb, in a conversation or whatever. For Pete's sake, he cut off the ear of one of the soldiers. You know what I'm saying? That's Peter. Oops. Sorry, I think I
oh, I got you.
a little bit. So, but nonetheless, you have Paul again, a guy who was persecuting Christians. So again, I don't want to go on and on, but just to say that the reality is not they are there not because they did everything right. They are there because God wanted to show that despite of who they are, God still used their lives and still did mighty things through them. Not because they are doing everything right, not because they are obeying God in every single way, but because they are available and say, okay, God, here is who I am. It is what it is, you know, and I want to, and one of the things just one last thing on this, I admire about David is because not only we know about him, about the stories, but he himself, he writes about his weaknesses. Who likes to write about his own weaknesses? Not many people, especially in the social media world. We want to do the other way around, right? It's like, here's how good I am. Here's what I'm doing right, so forth and so on. Nobody wants to talk about weaknesses. So, and that's much needed, to help others. So,
Yeah, and you go. to step from the Bible to you know our actual life or
Hmm.
where we're at right now. I mean, there's entire writing styles based off of what you just described, right? It's
Hmm.
called the 24 steps of the hero's journey. And
Hmm.
so like if it and I don't think people recognize this enough, that when they look at, like you said, when they look at a hero or when they look at a leader, they see perfection, right? And then ultimately there's a chink in the armor and something comes down and our perceptions swing way in the other direction and go, what else was I fooled by? Because you put, and it could go as far as the false representation or the false the false god scenario, right?
Yep.
Where
Yep. Yep.
we're following this person because we think that they're in this perfection. And if you go back and really look at a hero's journey, that it shows like there wasn't perfection there, right?
No.
The entire process of becoming a hero is
Hmm.
so much deeper and
Hmm.
and longer and entrenched with sins and pain and life, that it's
Yep.
not about being perfect through your entire life. It's not about
No.
doing the right things all the time. It's about screwing it up and then recognizing you're screwing it up and fixing it, or moving
Yep.
forward from it.
Yep.
And I made a video the other day, and I kind of want to bring this in because I think it really applies. And it's about, you mentioned about how people are stuck in a lot of the old ways, and how they're,
Hmm.
basing a lot of their decisions based off of what has happened in the past instead of where they currently are. And
Hmm.
my video was talking about how we need to start redefining ourselves on a daily basis
Yes.
instead of operating based off of the assumptions of that we've created for our lives. A
Yeah.
lot of people will come and you'll have a conversation with them, and their representation is, well, that's just how I am. You'll just have to get used to it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
instead of, oh, maybe I should change that, or maybe
Hmm.
I don't believe that anymore. And they don't question
Yeah.
things on a daily basis. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. You're
how do you see that coming through, especially in, obviously in the big C, like that comes out a lot, I think, is
well,
a lot of people represent who they were, not who they actually are.
yeah. I would say that in general, is the word to me, Ryan, is being teachable. This whole idea that is, I know what I know, I am who I am, that kind of a style, and that obviously bleeds into the church, and people not being willing to be teachable or vulnerable enough to say, hey, I messed up. You know, one of the things I always tell people that with my kids, I was by far not the perfect dad whatsoever, the other way around. Okay. In spite of being a pastor and everybody, like I said, the preconceived ideas. But I say, I don't think I ever really taught my kids a lot. However, one thing I always implemented in my relationship with them, if I was wrong, I went to them and says, hey, I'm sorry, I messed up. So they grew up with this idea that it's okay to mess up. It's not okay for you to dwell in it. It's not okay for you to ignore it, but it's okay to mess up and go from there, and reconciliation and forgiveness. It's okay. And outside of the church, that's the major problem. We want to be right, and we want to hurt people because we want to be right, no matter what, and that affects everything. Affects government, affects politics, affects the industries out there, whatever that is. So because we want to be right, and tell you what, society wise, we're not taught how to work our weaknesses in terms of, okay, I messed up, here's what I did, let's start from here. So people prefer to hide or to be defensive about it instead of being a teachable person. And that's what one last thing I want to say is that I emphasize to my leaders in the church, especially the elders, I said, listen, let's all be teachable. I know it's hard, okay, because many of them are CEOs in their companies, they own their companies and all that kind of stuff. And I said, it's hard. But I said, if we are only open to be teachable, it doesn't mean that you're going to agree on everything, but it means like there is a different perspective that can be better than mine. you know what if I learn? And even if I don't learn, at least I listen to. And so that's the key for me, that I see happening in church and happening everywhere. People not willing to be teachable. So
Yeah, I think the tough part with that too, you mentioned the teachable part. That's one side of it. The other side of it is that they're so unteachable
Yeah.
that they dig their heels in based off of even when they know they were incorrect, or they know that scenario, like they've absorbed that they messed it up,
Yeah.
and they dig in even deeper on that one topic. And
Yeah.
so now they've created even bigger wall for themselves to come over, so that if they do want to change in the future, now it's even harder for them to change, because they look back and they go, oh, I've dug in on that against other people. I have to stick with that mindset, or I have to stick with
Yeah.
the massive stand I took on something that I was just incorrect on.
Yeah.
And it's a really difficult way to live. I feel like it makes the world very, very small when you
Hmm.
do that, because you're almost making it like the world revolves around my opinion, and it's really difficult to be
Exactly.
around people that way.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's why I said it's a pattern in our society that affects everybody. Government affects, especially when it comes to political leaders. The people expect them to be the perfect whatever, and truly they are not. And they are afraid to show who they are, because if they do show, then people will say, "Oh, I'm going to vote on you," or "I'm not going to elect you," or "I'm not going to put in a position as a CEO," or whatever. Because sorry, I'm going on and on. Just one quick thing. It's like one time I was interviewing for a church, and they asked me what the typical questions, right? What is your strength? And you list all of them. And I said, what is your weakness? And I said, well, I think one of my weaknesses is more related to numbers, or more administrative. Not that I don't do it, but that's not my strength. And the interview at that point kind of shut it down, because people said, "You ask me, and I'm saying to you," but they are not prepared for what I was going to answer. They preferred that I would say, "Oh no, my weakness is that I work too hard," things like that. So yeah, that's what it is.
Yep. Well, Pastor, yeah, I greatly appreciate this. I think we've definitely opened up some topics for future conversations, and I'd love to have you
Absolutely.
back for a round two, probably round three, probably round 10. So, I like I said, I enjoy listening to you on the sermons, and I'll definitely, when we post this, I'll definitely throw a link up for the
Please.
gathering to get people involved, and
Yes,
I've
please.
truly enjoyed, and I know Carrie has as well, truly enjoyed our visits to the gathering and the people, and just felt welcomed from the beginning. So I appreciate you for
Yes,
fostering
man.
that environment and continuing to grow that church. So,
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate you, man, and keep on going. Keep it up.
all right, we will see you on the next one, everyone. Appreciate you
Right.
listening.